So our next presenter is Dr. Tim Gray. He's a professor and interim department head, University of Georgia, Department of Soil and Crop Sciences. His duties include research into herbicide dissipation from soil and mulch covers, vegetable work, physiological crop and weed responses to herbicides. He's the editor for Peanut Science, an extremely difficult job. He's also the associate editor for Weed Science since 2008. He's received numerous awards, not only through APRES, but through this organization, through this industry, and through his agricultural career. Please welcome Dr. Tim Gray.
Thank you, sir. I'm trying to share my screen. Let's see here. There we go. And I will turn on my video. There we go. You got me?
Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you, Gary, for that introduction. Well, Kim asked me to give you basically a historical aspect and where we stand in peanut science. With respect to peanut science, she sent me a email and said your title would be about 49 years of peanut science. And I sat there doing the math and I kept trying to figure out how is this 49 years, because you just get confused by it. But when you actually look at it from 1974 to 2022, which is the volumes we're working on now, that is 49 years. We've had 99 issues of peanut science. We had one extra issue last year in the age of COVID. And then we've had one special issue of Peanut Science as well. The first volume and issue of Peanut Science came out in March of 1974, and I'll talk a little bit more about it as we move forward. But essentially what you'll see with the cover on that issue was that there was actually a table of contents in a mailed volume that was sent to the subscribers to the journal. On the right-hand side over here, you'll see the last issue of Peanut Science that came out in 2020. This was volume 47, issue 3. And that's why there's 99 issues of Peanut Science, because we actually did 3 issues in 2020 because we had 34 submissions last year. We're lagging a little behind this year as compared to last year, but this just shows you that people actually turn to actually producing and writing all of their information in the age of COVID. So in one way, this was a benefit in terms of promoting the journal and actually allowed us to have one extra issue in 2020. If you look at the foundation of Peanut Science, it actually begins in 1972 in the Journal of the American Peanut Research and Education Society publication. This basically was called a journal, what we now call Proceedings. In volume 4, number 1, the meeting was actually held in July of 72 in Albany, Georgia. There was an ad hoc committee that was actually established under the Publications Committee. In 1973, this committee reported back to the board of directors. This meeting was actually held in Oklahoma City. And the Publications Committee basically consisted of Joe Sugg. You may know that name because his namesake is now with the graduate student competition. He was the chair of that Publications Committee. That also consisted of Hammonds, Mills, Perry, Reed, and Coit Wilson, which you also know that name for the Service Award with APRES. In a report to the Publication and Editorial Committee to the board on page 223, there was under section 3, the ad hoc committee chaired by Preston Reed and others presented a 16-point proposal for a refereed journal. And basically they decided that the title would be Peanut Science. This proposal was approved by the board. And so then we move forward. What they saw and stated is that voluntary articles on research or education methods would actually be submitted to the journal, wherein the scientists can publish original reports of research or educational methods not previously or simultaneously reported in other scientific or technical journal. Now, what you have to remember, this is in 1973. It was before the age of online submissions and online journal articles and total electronic submission scenarios. So this was quite an endeavor because they were starting a new journal. The editor of the journal shall be appointed by the board of directors, and they will serve as a 3-year term, and they were renewed for as many terms as the board of directors desires, or till the editor decided to basically retire from those duties. They had the forethought to understand that this journal was going to be very, very diverse. And so they allowed the editor to nominate as many associate editors as needed, because at the time at the APRES meetings, there were papers about engineering and irrigation, plant physiology, entomology, plant pathology, and weed science, extension education, food science and nutrition, marketing, and new products. So even at that time, they recognized the need for a journal to pull all of this information together. If you go to the 1975 proceedings, as you'll see here in this picture on the right, you'll see that it changed from a journal to a proceedings. And the reason is because in 1974, the Journal of the Peanut Science started to be published. This meeting was actually held in Dothan, Alabama in 1975. And the Publications Committee reported the first issue of Peanut Science was published in 1974, and Preston Reed was the first editor. And the report of the Publication Editorial Committee to the board on page 104 indicated that you were actually mailed the volume. Okay, so in spring of 1975 for volume 2, issue 1, there were 541 copies of the journal mailed to the members. There were also copies sent to libraries. There were 16 domestic libraries that received it, and there were 19 international. So immediately you can see the impact the journal made in terms of its recognition. But it was also sent to various complementary entities. There were 7 in total, and some of these included the Library of Congress, the Chemical Abstracts, and Field Crops Abstracts. So it had immediate impact in terms of its breadth and scope of recognition and being sent out and recognized around the world. Well, this is just simply the page that I showed you earlier on the title slide for Volume 1, Issue 1. The official title of the journal was Peanut Science, the Journal of the American Peanut Research and Education Association, or APRES. The first article was on the genealogy of APRES. If you think back to the previous slide, we had gone through volumes 5, 6, and 7 of the proceedings or the journal that was used to describe the events at each meeting. Well, one of the first things that was talked about is that APRES was formed in 1968, and we just had our 50th anniversary in 2018. And one of the articles that basically allows us to understand and remember the history of the organization is this first article in Peanut Science. There were 104 printed pages in Volume 1. There were 25 total articles in Volume 1. Notable authors in the first volume included Coit Wilson, Gail Buchanan, as you know, from a former Undersecretary of Agriculture, and Harold Pate as well. It was true to the scope. There were physiology papers, there were fertility papers, entomology, plant pathology, weed science, and many others. The number of citations, if you go to Google Scholar and look up the number of citations with respect to all of the articles within Volume 1, Issue 1 and 2, the most cited article in Issue 1 is the sources and nature of resistance to Cercospora and Cercosporidium in peanut species. And you can see it highlighted here in the yellow right here. And it's been cited 115 times in 48 years. And you may think, well, that's not a whole lot of times for a 48-year-old manuscript. But when you consider that prior to this, there was no really other outlet other than other pathology journals and such that these authors could actually put this in. But by putting it in Peanut Science, they actually serve as a mechanism to have it in a specific area that certain authors would be looking for. If you look at Issue 2, the composition changes of peanut fruit during maturation, Pate, it's been cited 95 times in 48 years, and I highlighted it in yellow over there on the right as well. So this just gives you an idea of, even though these articles are approaching 50 years old, they're still important, they're still being recognized, and they're still used as references in terms of the literature. The issue citations, if you go through all of the manuscripts in the first issue, they've been cited 209 times, according to Google Scholar, and in issue 2 on the right, a total of 212. So a little over 420 times the articles in this first volume have been cited. And so this just gives you an indication of the historical aspect and how this journal basically became a reference for authors in the future. And so it's even more important for us today to understand why we need to maintain Peanut Science as a journal. Just to give you an idea of what was going on in 1974 with the first issue and volume of Peanut Science, when issue 1 came out in 1974, Nixon was the president. And then when issue 2 came out, by then Watergate had occurred and Gerald Ford had become president. Now, the significance of that is, most of us, some of us remember these events. I was a kid in school. I remember coming home and seeing the Watergate trial, the Watergate hearings in Washington on TV. And from a lot of people's standpoint, a lot of people said it was a conspiracy so we could get a peanut president in the White House. And so you kind of have to think, well, what was going on in terms of other historical aspects? We still have Jimmy Carter. If you ever been to Plains and recognize that as a farmer, it was quite a change from in terms of what the presidents had been in the past. In terms of gas prices, they were 53 cents a gallon. I thought this was interesting. Milk was $1.40. A stamp was 10 cents. Bread was 28 cents. And the best I could find for a jar of Jif peanut butter was about $1. Just to give you why I'm talking about this, the cost of a submission to Peanut Science for galley form, the first 4 pages was $108. The next page would cost you basically $45 per half page. Now, why do you say a half page? Because this day of age of electronic submissions and electronic galleys, we don't charge by half pages. But back then, when you got a physical copy, that $45 for a half page would be quite significant in terms of publication, because of the publication, they wanted to put it on as few pages as possible. So a lot of times you would have overlapping with one article having half a page and the next article starting right below it. A 5-page galley would cost you $270, and they would send you 200 reprints at no charge. And for today's graduate students and recent graduates who basically probably been around since 2000, you might ask, well, what is a reprint? Because, a reprint, we don't have any clue what that is. Well, a reprint is what was sent to an author so they could respond to requests from other authors. And I have some reprints still with me. This is basically a manuscript that we published in the early 2000s. You can see it's about 4 centimeters thick for those 200 reprints. And what happened was the authors may be reading a different paper and they see a citation, or this citation they came across that you published is in a card catalog in a library or on a database someplace. But that library, as I showed you previously, didn't have that copy of the article. And so what the authors would do is they would drop you a postcard. And this is kind of what it looked like. This is from Chester Foy. He was the editor of Peanut or Weed Technology. And I had a paper that was published there, the response of 7 peanut cultivars. You can see he hand wrote it. And he sent me a request for that. And so I sent him a copy. Now we have online access via library and other resources. You can see every copy of every article for Peanut Science from the beginning, 1974. And that's automatically online. You have instant access. You can look at it on your phone. You can look at it on an iPad, whatever you want to look at, you can see it. And you can go to peanutscience.com and see all of those. And so I call it instant gratification. So the world has changed in terms of what Peanut Science and how it's delivered. So Peanut Science through the years, there's been multiple editors. Reed was the first editor, like I described before. He was involved with volumes 1 through 3, and then pages, he did 292. Harold Pate was 76 to 94. He was the longest serving editor of Peanut Science, constructing volumes 4 through 21, over 2,100 pages. Tom Stalker was the editor from 95 to 2004, volumes 22 to 31, responsible for over 1,200 pages. John Wilcutt took on the reins of Peanut Science in 2005. He updated Peanut Science to the current year as it lagged about 2 years behind. He was responsible for volumes 32 through 34, over 440 pages. But he also oversaw the transition to a total online submission and online viewing of Peanut Science. And so that was a big undertaking for John. John unfortunately passed away in 2007. He had at the time been editor of Weed Technology, but also with Peanut Science. And he was very, very big into promoting graduate students and publications of their research. With John's passing, Chris Butts was serving as an associate editor, and so he took on the responsibility of the editor in 2000, basically in 2007, but we credit him with 2008 to 2012, volumes 35 through 39, and he was responsible for over 770 pages of the journal. And then lastly, I have been the editor of Peanut Science since approximately 2013. I worked with Chris for about 18 months before assuming full responsibility in 2013 with volumes 40 through 48. You could put 49 on there if you want to, but I've been involved with over 1,300 pages. But if you look at the total number of pages in Galley, it's been almost 6,300 pages of Peanut Science. And so this is quite significant in terms of the information that is out there for our readers. But we would be nothing without the associate editors. And basically their assistance is what we need. I am not an engineer. I am not a genomics person. There's lots of things I'm not. I'm a weed scientist by training. And one thing that we have to have for Peanut Science is really, really good associate editors. They serve for 3-year terms. I generally ask them if they will. Generally, we try to limit it to 2 to 3 papers each year. We are in constant need of the associate editors because we have so many disciplines. Currently, we have 12 associate editors in the organization. And as you can see on the bottom slide, part of this slide, we have all the different covers. We started doing pictures on the cover of Peanut Science a few years ago, and you can see they range from physiology to peanuts grown in other countries, to entomology and technology, biotechnology, to smut that is prevalent in South America, and even irrigation. So obviously we need a lot of different types of editors, associate editors, to make it happen. This is just a list of the current associate editors. Chris Butts with USDA, Mark Abney with University of Georgia in entomology. Chris is in engineering. Dan Anko is in NC State with breeding. Maria Bellotta in breeding and physiology at Virginia Tech. Kira Bowen in plant pathology at Auburn University, and Albert Culbreth in plant pathology at UGA. Jack Davis is one of our non-academics with JLA Global. This is one thing that I do enjoy, is having non-academics in our society and on our Peanut Science editorial that helps us with a lot of topics that we can't normally get out of academic scenarios. Ramon Leone is at NC State. He's in weed science. Chris Liebold with J.M. Smucker in chemistry, essentially with food. He is one of those that I enjoy getting emails from him, because every time you get an email for Chris, there is an advertisement at the bottom of the email, basically promoting some of their new products. Andy Price with USDA, and then Nathan Smith with Clemson University, and Sham Talari breeding with USDA ARS. So all of these people are very valuable to us, and we are always looking for others to help us. But just as important are the reviewers. The reviewers, we do try to do 2 for each submission. We try to have them reviewed within 30 days as soon as you submit. It may take me a week or 10 days or 2 weeks to get it set up so we can send it out for review. The average time to the first decision in 2020, whether it was reject, accept with major or minor revisions to the authors, was 43 days, and that's coming from the associate editor. And then the average time to accept after revision by the authors in 2020 was 30 days. And again, that's coming from the associate editor through me. So overall, you're looking at about 60 days here that the authors submit, and then it's returned back to the authors. That does not include the time that the authors take to revise the paper. The exact average acceptance rate in 2013 through 2020 as myself as editor has been about 83%. So if you see that around 80% of the time, if you submit a paper to Peanut Science, it's going to be accepted. It does go through some rigorous evaluations. Try not to let them try not to be critical. We try to be very constructive. Just as comparison, under Chris, the average acceptance rate from 2008 to 2012 was 86%. So we're about on par in terms of the acceptance rate for peanut science. Just some analytics. Some of the most cited articles in peanut science was Booth's growth stages of peanut from 1982. It's been cited over 450 times for Google Scholar. And if you're out there as an author and you're working on your dissertation and thesis, you should actually use this as a reference for your growth staging of your peanuts. There was a special issue of Peanut Science in 2019. It was from the 2018 50th anniversary meeting up in Virginia. Katie Beasley, Corley Holbrook, Howard Valentine, Chris Butts, Kelly Chamberlain, Scott Tubbs, Jack Davis, and Nick Defoe all gave topics and talked about basically the historical aspect of the society and of peanut industry in general. And what was nice about this is we actually published this. Kim Cutchins did a design. And the reason this is important to us is because we spent a lot of hours. Craig actually worked on this with the recordings and getting them transcribed, and then Kim on the cover and others. We spent many, many hours getting this. And the reason it's important to us is because in 50 years, we'd like to be able to look back and have our people in the future say, well, these people really cared about this society, and they put a lot of information and work into making sure that we understand the historical aspect, just as we do and did today in terms of 50 years ago. The H-index for peanut science is a 32. We've had over 1,200 articles published. The Journal of Cotton Science, the H-index is 39. You're sitting there going, what the heck is an H-index? Well, an H-index is defined as the maximum value of H such that given author journal has published at least H papers, at least H times have been cited. You have an H-index. If you've published any papers, you can look it up. And so the H-index works when comparing scholarly works in the same field. And we've had almost 6,300 pages, 1,200 articles. That ends up being about 5 pages per galley, which is kind of interesting. Other H indexes, Agronomy Journal is 131. It's obviously published many more times. There's much more issues in a year than the Cotton Science or Peanut Science. Crop Science has an H index of 147. Weed Science, that I'm familiar with, has an H index of 91. It's published 6 times a year. So just to give you an idea, our H index is comparable to other journals, such as Plant Pathology with a 95 in terms of the number of articles published. What is the future of peanut science? In 2021, we will end our collaboration with Allen Press. We are thankful for them for hosting the submission page and publication of volumes 32 to 48. Beginning in 2022, we will have a new platform, the Janeway Submission Portal. If you want to see an example of how that portal works, go to Iowa State University Digital Press. They have a meat and muscle biology journal there, and you can see it actually how it will be set up. And the publication will actually be held with APRES, and we are outsourcing the initial setup. And what we need are graduate student volunteers. So if you're a graduate student out there, we are asking you today to help us enter data into the new system. And basically, this will be an opportunity for you to learn about scientific publication. It will not take a great deal of your time. We're not asking you to code. We're asking you to basically help us put the newest version and put peanut science with the society, so we'll have it in perpetuity here. Kim Cutchins, you can email her or myself, or even Nick Hurdle, current APRES graduate student president of the organization, and we'll get you in line so that we can start doing this process. We hope to have this online this fall, and we'll send more information out as it comes along. First off, I'd like to thank Dr. Branch. He helped me, even though he didn't know it. I used all of his old journals that he had in his office that he always keeps around and shares with me if I need them. Kim Cutchins, like Gary said a while ago, without her support, we just would be nowhere. So she's been instrumental. Sydney Cromer takes great pictures, as you see by this Comet Neowise picture in the bottom. 2020 brought a lot of bad news, but I'm an avid amateur astronomer, but I can't take pictures like this. Sydney did. And so we were all out looking for this at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning. and then later on in the afternoons, and it's just a great picture. But I also want to thank all of you as readers of Peanut Science, because without you and the support of the society, the journal wouldn't be where it is today. We had 34 submissions last year, and that just goes to show you the continued interest in the journal. I'd like to thank everyone for 49 years of success of Peanut Science. And if you'd like to see us, just go to peanutscience.com. And with that, Gary, I'll stop there and answer any questions. I'm probably out of time.
No, sir. Your previous speaker ran over, so you're good. There is one question here from
Sure.
Chris Butts. Where will the historical volumes be hosted?
They'll be through, and they'll stay there with on the peanutscience.com webpage is what will, with APRES is who they'll be hosted by. So we'll be carrying that forward.
Another question. Mustafa asked, how did you ensure continuity, and what motivates you here, I guess, as Peanut editor?
So to ensure continuity, I make sure and talk to the associate editors if and when they have questions. We do a lot of emails back and forth, and a lot of it is just personal drive in order to make sure. I look at this as a historical document in terms of the society, and to me it means something and it's personal to me, so I kind of like making sure that it goes out and it's always of the highest quality and meets the standards of our predecessors. And so transition wise, whoever is the next editor, and obviously I'm not going to be the editor forever, I'm not looking to give it up anytime soon, but if there's somebody out there who could do a better job and can promote it and take on this job, that'll happen sooner rather than later, I can guarantee you. And so I'll work with whomever that is. I worked with Chris for about, I don't know, maybe a year to 18 months doing exactly what we're doing now, and he trained me. So that's what we would hope to do, whoever is the next editor.
Great answer. I know that this is, there's a lot of work that goes into reviewing these reports, reviewing this information, publishing it, and I know the society appreciates you and all the previous editors and the co-editors. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Gary.